Hello everybody, and welcome to the 50 State Haunt, Delaware. Hello, I'm Brent, and this is Strange Embers. So tonight I'm going to be going into my top 5 Delaware haunts. None of these will be a deep dive. What I'm going to do is give a brief overview of all 5 and enjoy. Number 5, the ATC Bed and Breakfast. The ATC Bed and Breakfast is in Bethany Beach. It has been said by some to have 3 haunted rooms in this bed and breakfast. One of them being room 1, which at one point in time it had a copper bathtub, and it was reported that the tub would shake violently from time to time. After enough reports were made, the tub was removed in the 1970s. Some people say that organ music can be heard coming from room 6, and room 6 has no organ inside of it. Also, room number 11 is supposedly haunted by a man named Paul Delaney, who used to work for the bed and breakfast. Number 4, the Shelbyville Swamp Monster. So this one is a cryptid. Since the early 1960s, legend has had it that a grotesque creature known as the Shelbyville Swamp Monster lurks in the murky terrain of the Great Cypress Swamp in Shelbyville, Delaware. Over 40 years ago, Ralph Grapperhaus, the editor of the Delmarva News, willingly admitted to creating the hoax of the Shelbyville Swamp Monster, producing the story of a monster that inhabited the Great Cypress Swamp. He even went as far as to have a friend dress up and play the role of the Yeti-like creature. The costume was made by Fred Stevens, using his Aunt Dorothy's old raccoon hat, a scary mask, and a club. Stevens would hide in the shadows of the woods and then jump out at passing cars on Route 54. And then a local legend from it soon unfolded. A photo of the Shelbyville Swamp Monster even made the front page of Delmarva News on April the 23rd, 1964. Stevens then was 26 years old. He went as far as participating in the hunt to locate the creature of the Great Cypress Swamp. The prank continued for months until eventually Stevens feared for his own safety. However, it wasn't until 23 years later in 1987 that Stevens revealed his hidden role and the secret he and Ralph Grapperhaus had kept for so many years. Oddly, the residents continued to report sightings of a monster even after Stevens ceased the charade. Even stranger is the fact that Stevens hasn't played the Shelbyville Swamp Monster since 1964. But in fact, strange sightings and happenings in the swamp were reported even before Stevens and Ralph Grapperhaus began their swindle. In the 1920s, a couple of hunters reported hearing loud, inhuman screaming, followed by sounds of something very large and very heavy racing towards them. So is it possible that there really is a monster roaming around in the Great Cypress Swamp? Is there a Shelbyville Swamp Monster really out there? Number 3, the Cannonball House. So the Cannonball House is owned by the Lewes Historical Society now. The Cannonball House is named for the cannonball that struck the foundation in April of 1813 when the British bombarded Lewes. If you take a look in the pictures, you will see on the screen, you will see the cannonball that is actually still there to that day. If you are anywhere by there, you can go by there and see it for yourself. It was built around 1765. This building has been a restaurant, a laundromat, and the private home of pilots, including Captain David Rowland. It was reported that his family member Susan lost her life when her skirts brushed against the hearth and caught fire. Since the society bought the property in 1963, there have been some mysterious happenings. There's one door that will not stay shut. It has even been nailed closed and still will not stay shut. In another incident, a worker left his tools on the bench after a day's end. The next morning when he came into work, all of his tools were on the floor as if someone had carefully placed them there. A key once went missing from the lock of a displayed 16th century Spanish chest. Since the workers had accidentally shut the lid, everyone had assumed that the key had fallen inside the chest, which had locked when it shut. While cleaning the property, a maintenance man stumbled upon a coiled rope that no one had ever noticed being there. When he picked it up, the key was underneath it. Susan is said to be a playful spirit, but a more aggressive specter might occupy the society's nearby Raves Holt house. While investigating the structure's basement, the late Rick Cohard, founder of Delmarva Historic Haunts, felt something or someone touch his arm. He said, quote, "Someone is up close and in your personal space, but you can't see anyone," end quote. He found the experience very hard to forget. Number 2, the Rockwood Mansion. The Rockwood Mansion was built in the mid-1800s by retired banker Joseph Shipley. The rural Gothic Revival estate, modeled after its owner's lavish country home in Liverpool, England, sits on 72 sprawling acres. In 1973, the property was left to Newcastle County for public use and became Rockwood Park and Museum, offering various guided tours and events to sustain itself. An absence of sanctions allowed guests to get close to what are mostly original belongings inside of it, fostering a more personal connection. After Shipley's death, the property went to his great-nephew Edward Bringhurst, whose family lived here for several years, along with their beloved pets and servants. Many visitors to the mansion today say they still encounter its early residents, all of them being long dead. Rick Lovelace, a researcher and paranormal coordinator at the old Rockwood Mansion in Wilmington, he said, quote, "I've identified 28 spirits," end quote. Lovelace has hosted over 100 tours using a series of paranormal investigating tools, including EMF meters, thermal cameras, and a ghost box to communicate with whom he believes are Shipley, the Bringhurst, and others affiliated with the family. And at the number 1 spot, Fort Delaware. Fort Delaware State Park on Peapatch Island in the middle of the Delaware River, originally constructed in 1859. It's a star-shaped fort, built first of wood and then of brick and stone. It is surrounded by a moat, but it's not a moat that you would normally think of. There's no crocodiles, no alligators in the moat. Instead, the moat that surrounded the fort mostly served as a sewage system. The bathroom that was in the fort to use was simply wood with holes cut in it, so all the waste went directly into the moat. The fort was used as a prison camp for Confederate prisoners of war during the Civil War. Later, it was used to store guns and protect the ports of Wilmington and Philadelphia during the Spanish-American War. Now it is believed to be one of the most haunted places in Delaware. Fort Delaware was notorious for its role as a prison, and the majority of those captured came from the hellish battlefields of Gettysburg. Almost 13,000 prisoners were held there at one time, and around 33,000 were kept there in total over the course of the war. The conditions were very rough there, and some odd 2,500 men died at the fort. The food rations were very tiny, and they were nearly inedible. The water was putrefied, and the prisoners were so tortured that the sergeants would throw rats into the crowds of men. They would call this rat call and watch them all scramble for a warm meal, all while they laughed at them struggling to try to catch a rat. Scurvy, smallpox, and severe malnutrition were very prevalent. Many of them are now buried in Finns Point National Cemetery just across the river in New Jersey. No prisoners were ever actually housed inside the walls of the fort. They were held in barracks located somewhere on the island. You can find living quarters, offices, a kitchen, and a mess hall. A large part of the fort was dedicated to the storage of munitions. The fort was abandoned towards the end of World War II and became a state park in 1951. One of the most popular stories was of an attempted escape of a 9-year-old Confederate drummer boy. Legend has it that he tried to fake his own death in order to be transported back across the river in a coffin. Waiting on the other side of the river would either be a sympathetic Union troop or fellow inmates who were supposed to free him from the coffin. But unfortunately, a shift change swapped personnel, and instead of being freed when he made it across, they buried the boy alive. It is said that's a tale that is told if you visit the fort, but no one can actually find any records of where that actually happened. Another one of the ghosts that's there is called the Blue Man Ghost. I have not been able to find a backstory of the Blue Man Ghost, but if you look on the screen, you will see the picture of a tourist had took that caught a picture of the Blue Man Ghost. Take a look on the screen, you'll see the picture. Well, everybody, that's the top 5 interesting places that I found in Delaware. If you're from there, if you've been there, if you know anything about there, feel free to jump in the comments. Let me know, is there some other places I should look at? If you got stories, drop them in the comments also. We'd love to hear them. Everybody that's came by, thank you for being here. I appreciate every one of you for being here. Thank you for all the likes, all the subscribes. Remember to comment, thumbs up. And with that, we will see you on the next one. Have a good night.